Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about the for loop in JavaScript. So, have you ever wanted to do something repeatedly? You want to repeat something? So the first instinct is to write it down. So you can write it once, twice, thrice, all that until you get to around 50. So this will be very repetitive, and that's why we need something to loop for us. So in that case, we do have a for loop. For loop in JavaScript is basically used to iterate or go through a certain number of times, which is satisfied by the condition. So we're going to check all that because we need to learn about that. So here are the table of contents. We do have what is a for loop. We'll learn about the syntax of the for loop, a basic example of the for loop, the variations of the for loop, common mistakes to avoid, and then practical use cases and a conclusion. So what is a for loop? So a for loop in JavaScript is a control statement, and it is essentially runs a block of code repeatedly for a specified number of times or until the condition is false. So it involves an initializer. So take note of this. It involves an initializer, a condition, and an expression to either increment or decrement the initialized value. So to use the for loop, you need to tell it where do you want to start, what is the condition that governs this condition, and then what should we do as soon as the block of code is run. And commonly this is where you increment the value that was initialized so that during the next iteration when the condition is running, the condition can still be valid so that we don't get into an infinite loop. So I'm going to see all that. So let's use a simple analogy to understand the for loop. So imagine a farm boy. A farm boy is fetching water to fill a tank for their cows. So I have a mirror board open here, so I'll just create let me create some tanks. So this is a tank. Don't worry about my drawing. So this one is a tank, and the first this is the farm boy. So this is the farm boy, and this farm boy, the first thing the farm boy did was to get the empty tank. So we do have cows here. These are cows. So there is no water when it starts. So the farm boy initializes or brings an empty tank, or maybe the tank is there. So that's the first thing they do. And then the next thing here is the river. So let me draw a river here. So this is the river. The river, this is the river, this is the river. And then the farm boy has some sort of jerrycan, J for jerrycan, and the farm boy makes trips to the river to get the water. So at this point, the farm boy needs to understand the tank is essentially, when starting it's empty. The farm boy gets the water from the river. So this is the river, and then fetches the water and comes and puts the water inside the tank. And then what determines whether the farm boy will get more water is whether the tank is full or not. So the farm boy fetches the water and the water reaches here. So this is like a condition. So the condition is unless the tank is full, or we can say the farm boy, go get water until the tank is full. So the farm boy will come and fetch the water, come and fill the tank. It's not full. So that's a condition the farm boy is checking, and then comes fetch water. And then at the end, this guy will have filled the tank. And then the condition becomes true. The tank is full, so the farm boy can't go get some water. So we could write that condition as we have the initializer is an empty tank. I don't know whether I can write here. So we have an initializer is equals to 0. So the tank is empty. I'm just notifying that. and then we need the condition. So this is the syntax of the for loop. So we do have the for keyword. So this essentially denotes that we are starting a for loop. So we have the initializer, and then after the initializer, we need a condition. So I want you to understand this. So we need an initializer. We need initializer. Let's call it I. And then we have the condition. And then finally we have an expression. So this is the syntax for the for loop. So the fanboy starts with an empty tank. And then the condition the fanboy checks is that as soon as the water is full, so that's the condition. And then if the water is not full, we increment the water. So we add water to the tank. So we can say I plus plus, and I plus plus denotes the empty tank. I plus plus is adding water from the jerry can. And the condition is, so this guy will get water. So this is the block of code that is running. So the block of code here is get water. Get some water. So it's a bit hard to type to draw with the mouse. So the condition is get some water. So what should we do so that this guy doesn't get water when the tank is full? So we could say, you go get water when, as long as I is the tank. So what is in the tank? We're talking about what is in tank. Unless I is less than or equals to the tank's length or the tank's depth, or the tank is full. So we can use the height, maybe th. So we start with an empty tank, and then the condition, this is what determines whether we are going to run the block of code. So the condition is whenever the amount of water in the tank is not full, because we are doing whenever the water is less than the height of the tank, so the water is not full, this guy goes grabs water. And then before running the condition again, this is run at the last, is we increment the water, and by incrementing the water we are adding water to the tank, and this cycle repeats until the water is full and this guy doesn't go to get water. So if I open my VS Code, here and we try to denote this, is that, yeah, so the syntax of you start the for loop keyword, and then we said we need an initializer. So let me just write here. So we need an initializer, and then we need a condition, and then we need an expression. And basically here we are either incrementing or decrementing. Don't worry about the spelling mistakes, but it's okay. So the syntax of for loop, we start with an empty tank. How can we denote an empty tank? We can say we are basically creating a variable. So let's tank, let's use t for tank. You can use any variable you want, is equals to 0. The tank is empty. We are starting with an empty tank. And then the condition is as long as the, let's assume, because currently we don't know, let's assume that a full tank, let's say full tank has water capacity of 10, because we need to denote the volume of the water. Maybe let's assume this is the volume. So initially this volume is 0, and then for it to go full, it's 10. So we can say as long as the current volume is less than or equals to 10, or you need to use colons to separate, as long as the current tank volume is less than the full tank's volume, which is 10, and then we increment t plus 1, assuming, so we could do, so this is essentially similar to doing t plus plus. So t plus plus, t plus plus is the same as t is equals to t plus 1. So what determines what we are incrementing with? We are currently assuming that each jerrycan carries 1 volume. So what if the jerrycan carries 2? We could do t plus, we can do t is equals to t plus 2. So whatever determines, let me just create an empty code block. So whatever determines what we are adding at the expression determines how much volume is the jerry can carrying. So our assumption here, the jerry can carries one volume. So if it carries one volume, so we are going to add one volume to the empty tank. All right. So this is the tank which initially it's empty. And then as long as the tank's volume is not equals to the full capacity of the volume, which is 10, then we increment the tank volume, current volume with 1. Right. And this is essentially similar to doing t++. And then go get some water. So this is the fanboy. So we can console.log. You can console.log. We can do current volume. Current volume, we do something like t. And then let's run this code. So if you do node index.js, you can see the current volume is 0. The guy goes fetches water. It is incremented 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's essentially is the syntax of the for loop. So I hope you did get some insights. So we have an initialization. We initialize, and then we do have a condition, which now this one gauges whether we go and do some action. Then we have an expression, and the task ends as soon as the tank is full, and that's it. So we did talk about the syntax of the for loop, but I'll just go through it again. So we can say syntax of the for loop. So the syntax of the for loop, we said we need an initializer, we need a condition, and we need an expression, something of incrementing and decrementing. So essentially this one is like you increment mostly or decrement. All right, so let's assume we want to loop from 0 to 10. So we can do for the initializer, we are starting at 0, I is equals to 0. You can use any, we can use any variable here. So we can say whenever that, now we know we want to increment I with 1. So we can do I++, which is similar to I equals I plus 1. What is the condition? We want to loop until we reach 10. So the fact we need to ask ourselves, so at what point should we stop running the code here? So let's say console.log I. At what point do we want to run until the 10th value, or we want to run before we reach the 10th value? So let me do 5. So whenever I is less than 5, so that means I will loop. Let's do this manually and slow. During the first iteration, let me just create a very big comment here. So during the first iteration, I is 0. So we do I is equals to 0. So I is equals to 0. The condition is run. We check, is I less than 5? That's true. We come and run the code. So we console. So the value we add here is the console. So we console log v equals, we console log 0. We go to now we don't get to the next iteration. So we have already console logged 0. The incrementer kicks in. This is the expression. So this is the syntax. We start from here. We check the condition. If the condition is true, we run the condition, the block of code, and then we do the expression, which essentially in this case, we are just incrementing the value of 1. So now I is equals to 1. Is I less than 5? True. And this code block here, this is called a code block, is run only when the condition is true. So I is currently 1. We come and console log 1. We kick in the incrementer. So we get I++. So I now becomes 2. And if I becomes 2, is 2 less than 5? That's true. We run the code block, and then we print 2. We go on, I becomes 3 because we kicked in the incrementer, and then is 3 less than 5? That's true. We run the code. We get 3, right? Just follow along, and then we kick in the same incrementer, so I becomes 4. And what do we do with 4? Is 4 less than 5? That's true. So console log 4. Finally, we kick in the expression, which is an incrementer, and we increment. So we said, don't forget this one. So I plus plus is similar to I equals to I plus 1. It's just since it's a very, very commonly used syntax, they introduced this incrementer, and most programming languages have it. So now I is 5. Let's go to our condition. Is I less than 5? That's wrong. That's false, because 5 is not less than 5. 5 is equals to 5. So we skip, we get out of the for loop and we don't run the code block. So we don't print anything. So what do we expect to print? We expect to print from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. But what if we had I is less than or equals to 5? So what could we have done? We could have seen I is equals to 5. So is 5 less than or equals to 5? That's true. And we come and we run this and we continue. So we print 5. I is incremented to 6. So is 6 less than or equals to 5? That's wrong. That's false. So we don't run the code block and we continue with running our code. So let's start with the scenario whereby we don't have less than or equals to. And then if we run our code, node index.js, we get this. If we introduce our equal sign, and then this is what we get. Same scenario. So here it will be run because 5 will be less than or equals to 5. And that's the syntax for the for loop. There is nothing else you need to run about the for loop. This is enough to get you going. All right. This is actually what is happening under the hood. So this is what you should be understanding. Just understand how the code is running, what the code is doing. And then from there, you can start building upon this and working on very complex problems. We'll see that. We'll just do like one example and then we can continue. So we do have the basic example whereby I've just shown you. You can read this article and continue to understand. So the next thing we can do, it will show you, is that how can we loop backwards? So what if we wanted to loop from number 5? So as soon as you get the concept of the for loop, then it becomes very easy to do anything you want. So we want to loop from 5. So you want to loop from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So this is the question. So if you can pause the video and try to do this and try to think whatever I have just told you, we need an initializer. So where do we want to start? We want to start at I is equals to 5. What is our condition? Our condition, we want to loop until 0. So we can say whenever I is greater than or equals to 0, because we want to check whether the I has gone below 0. So it's either greater or equals to 0. Or you could do greater than -1, because this one will still stop at 0, because -1 is not greater than -1, but essentially just use the equal sign. So greater or equals to 0. Then what is the condition? We are moving from 5 to 0. We need to subtract 1. I is equals to I minus 1. And this is exactly equals to I minus minus. So this is just a short form. And then if we console log that, we do it in reverse. Like there's nothing new here. So we could be able to do that because you have to understand how the for loop is working. And by doing so, you do understand how this one is going. And that just to make sure that you do understand what is going on, I'll do the classic thing I did previously. So whereby I starts at 5. So is 5 greater than or equals to 0? That's true. We go into the block code and we console log I. So we console log 5. And then, so what is our next I? So to get our next I, we run the expression, which by this scenario, the expression is decreasing or decrementing by 1. So we do 5 minus 1, we get 4. Is 4 greater than or equals to 0? True. So we console log 4. And then we kick in the expression, whereby now we do I is equals to 3. And then we print 3. We go I is equals to 2. We do 2. Because we did 3. So is 3 greater than 0 or equal? Yeah, true. We run the code. Is 2 greater than or equals? That's true. And then we go to 1 is equals to 1. Then we do is 1 greater than or equals to 0? That's true. We console log 1. Then we go to 0. Is 0 greater than or equals to 0? That's true. Then we console log 0. And then we hit a snag whereby we decrement 0 by 1, we get minus 1. And then the condition fails because minus 1 is not greater or equals to 0. We skip out of the for loop and we continue with our lives. So essentially, understanding the basic logic of the for loop is enough to get you going. Right, so we have common mistakes you need to avoid is that if you mess up the condition, so let me just copy this. If you mess up the condition, you enter into something called an infinite loop because we start at I0, but we do this whenever I is greater than 0, and then we increment I. So this one will run indefinitely because I will be 1 and any value above 0 will always go to true. So that means this condition will always run. And this is very wrong. You shouldn't do that. Finally is one of errors. So whereby if you want to loop on a certain thing, so let me just show you. We have something called an array. So we could do let fruits is equals to pawpaw, oranges, and pineapples. So if you want to loop on this array, the syntax is similar, but in this scenario, we are looping on a real entity. And we saw that the for loop gives us just the values. So we can only loop on a range. So what could we do to essentially grab these items as themselves? So the first thing we need to ask ourselves, where are we starting? We always, most of the time, if you are looping on an entity like an array or an item, you need to start at 0. We can say when I is equals to 0, we start there. Where do we want our I to stop at? Remember, array indexing starts at 0. It starts at 0, so I'll just do this is index 0. This is index 1. And this is index 2. And the length is equals to 1, 2, 3. Just count 1, 2, 3. So do you see the discrepancy? If we want to loop through the range of the indexes of the fruits, our condition should be whenever that I is less than the length, then I plus plus. Then let me just finish and then show you. Then console.log I. Right, so what is happening? Our length is 3, but our array indexing starts at 0, 1, 2. So that means, let's do it the way I did show you. So this is what will happen is that I will be 0. We start with I0, I is equals to 0. And then we come and console log is, so the length will be evaluated to 3. So essentially we don't have length anymore here. We have 3. All right. So then we print 1. We print 0. Okay. We continue, we increment, we get 1, and then we do I is equals to 1, and then is 1 less than 3? True. Then we continue, we print 1, and then we go to 2. Now I is equals to 2. So it's true less than 3, that's true. We continue, we increment, then we get to 3, so I is equals to 3. And then is 3 less than 3, that's false. So this condition is not evaluated. We only print 0, 1, 2. Let's do it. Okay, so I did not save this. 0, 1, 2. So what is the common mistakes that people do? They don't understand how the for loop works. And then you come and do whenever I is less than or equals to 3. What will happen? When we get to the third item, so the third, when I is 3 less than or equals to 3? Yes, we print 3. But 3 is not found in our fruits array indexes because the array indexes starts at 0 and our length counts the items. So there will be a discrepancy there. Because now we could print, we are printing up to 0, 3, but we don't have array index 0. And this is where the issue comes to play because we have the indexes of the fruits. The next question is, how do we access an item from an array using its index? It's very, very simple. So to access, you can use the brackets notation. So you can say fruits of I because we have the index upper hand. All right. So since we have the index, we can access an array using its index because we looped over the indexes. But here is where the issue comes to play. We don't have array index 3 because we failed to to understand how the for loop is working and the length and all that. So let's see what happens. We get undefined because there is no item in the arrays that is index 3. So what you should do is follow the condition as it is follows because we want to loop on the indexes and the indexes run up to 2 because of the 0 and the length goes up to 3. So we cannot do the length equals because it will give us some errors. All right, I hope you did understand about that. So let's continue. That's the off by 1. Then we continue to the practical use cases. I did show you how you can loop over items. We did loop, we just finished looping over. Let me just show you what happens. So let's do it again so that you can understand. So we say I is equals to 0. Is I less than 3? That's true. We come here. What are we console logging? We are console logging fruits. So we can do fruits of 0. So this is very simple. What is this? So we are trying to access the array item with index 0. And which array item is that? So fruits of index 0 is pawpaw. We print pawpaw. We continue like that until we get to the pineapples. It's very, very simple. That's what we get if we continue like that. You can do more things with the item itself. You can do something else. You can add or you can do whatever you want from that. So the next thing is that we can clean up arrays. So some of these you can go and learn them by yourself. Is that as soon as we can clean up arrays, we can now start doing checks. Let me just show you one of the use cases. Is that instead of console logging the fruits, what if you wanted to find if there is a fruit that is called pawpaw, or is called, let's use the pineapples or the oranges. Let's see whether there is a fruit called oranges in the fruits array. So we could use an if statement and say if fruits of I is equals to, let's use a triple equals, is equals to oranges, then we can do console.log oranges found at index. Then we write the index, and then something we always do is that we break. And the reason we break is that we don't want to continue with the others because we don't want to continue with the other items because we already found what we wanted. Then if you can do this, origins was found at index 1. You can do multiple things as soon as you understand that this one gives you an access to the actual item in the array. Then you can do more stuff from that. And then that would be fantastic. You can generate a list of numbers. It's quite simple, whereby you start combining array methods like you push calculations from the for loop to the newly created item array and all that kind of stuff. You can do sum. You can do mathematical expressions to the newly created item, or you can do, let me just give you some questions. So I want you to count the total number of characters in the fruits array items. So you count the characters in purples, characters in oranges, and characters in pineapples. So what can you do from that way? So the first thing is that we already have to loop through the indexes, and then since we need the track of the total, so we can create a variable called total is equals to 0. And then inside here we can do total. Now let's write variables. So let the length is equals to fruits of that item. We get that specific item dot length. And then we can add that total. So total plus is equals to length. So this one is exactly equals to total is equals to total plus length. So don't confuse that. And that's it. Then we can console log the total at the end. So console log total. Quite simple. So you can do a lot of stuff with just understanding how the for loops work. And you can do a lot of stuff. So, and that's it, guys. That's it from me. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, share with your friends, and let's meet again next time. Thank you.